Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Red Flag 16-2 campaign in the A-10C Warthog. I'm going to close out Mission 6 with a quick debrief in TACVIEW. So I'm airborne now, and it was a pretty standard departure and form up with the rest of the mission package, but I had to cut the corner right here slightly just to make the timing, and I believe the timing has been adjusted, like I think I said earlier in the mission, in the final release version of the campaign. So we come up here, and this part is becoming very, very standard by now. And form up, and then we all just push in as one big mission package with our fighter sweep consisting of 2 flights of F-15s out in front of us, heading up against SA-8, SA-9, and MiG-23 as far as threats. So as the situation develops, we get into a big F-15 versus MiG-23 battle up here right off the bat, and I'll fast forward to that point. So it develops into basically an 8-on-6 F-15 versus MiG-23 confrontation with an exchange of radar-guided missiles, most of which were deceived by chaff on both sides. It wasn't really until it developed into a big furball with IR-guided missiles going every which way that this resolved itself, with the F-15s coming out on top in the end for the most part. So that air battle has developed itself, and by this time I'm down here starting to make contact with the JTAC and get set up for my runs with a clear air picture at this point. So I check in with the JTAC, who has by this time made his way into the middle of this ground force that we're going to be taking out. I don't know if this was intentional on the mission designer's part. I actually kind of like this aspect of it because it made me think about weapons choices once I identified that the coordinates passed from the JTAC were practically right on top of them. So I stayed away from the CBUs until the very end and just strictly used AGM-65s for these shots. And my thought on this first pass was to identify targets and then just to mix things up, 3 and 4 go in there and take out air defenses. I give that command over the radio as we see some F-16s going in there and mixing it up with our side as well. I hear actually the missile launches on my missile warning system. I thought those missile launches were the AGM-65s going in off of 3 and 4. So I thought at this point that the air defenses were down. And I go in and make my run against armor, identifying the JTAC location and then taking out the armor that's closest to us, or a couple of pieces. And I'm lucky that I got these shots off fairly quickly and didn't get into that SA-9 envelope, although I think I would have been okay still, just with my habit patterns that I've developed of any time that I know that I'm getting close to any suspected threat location, of just dumping out countermeasures as I'm either apexing in a climb or just turning out of the area. So I go in, 2, 3, and 4 do the same. 3 and 4 take out their air defenses, and then it's pretty much just fair game for anything that I want to take out and identify right there in that area. However, at this point, we have some MiG-25s pop up out there in the distance. I pick up on that fact just off of RWR hits and calls from AWACS, but I don't react to it. I think if I had known a little bit more about what the air picture was with nothing except for a couple of Strike Eagles, one of the Dodge flights, between me and these MiG-25s, I might have actually pulled back at this point if I didn't know there were no F-15s between me and them. But I do press on, just keeping an eye on things, make a couple more passes, and send 2, 3, and 4 in there one more time. This is my last AGM-65 shot. Now, something to note here, and I'll pause it right there as it impacts, is that this ended up being a lot closer to the JTAC, who was right here, than I thought it would be. The JTAC was only about 500 feet away from this impact, which for an AGM-65, granted he would have been fine, but I did positively identify that I was on the target that I thought I was on, but it was just a lot closer in reality than it looked in the targeting pod. So that's a lesson learned for me to take away, just to use the yardstick function of the targeting pod and just be aware of the zoom level that I'm at when assessing a situation like that. I think that would have kept me from firing at that point. So at this point, my entire focus is on evading these MiG-25s. I know they're coming at this point, just based off the RWR, and I think AWACS calls merged right about now. Once I really break back into the area, that would have been probably right about there. So we come around, I pick up on the missile launch, and just like those missile launches in that earlier phase of the mission, the F-15 versus MiG-23 battle, this one was deceived by chaff. I think it was actually off of 2 right here. And the first missile just went ballistic, and I just turned back in, trying to set myself up for a shot. I almost had a valid A-9 shot and took it right here. About this point, I was struggling with switchology on the A-9s throughout this entire sequence. I was trying to get the A-9s to uncage at several points, but because I didn't have my HUD as sensor of interest. Going TMS up short wasn't doing anything for me, so I think in at least one of the cases, maybe both, I just had to leave the missile bore-sighted and just put the circle for the missile bore-sighted location in the HUD on the target and then get a lock and fire. But, I mean, this isn't a very good geometry for an A-9 shot to begin with, so at this point, my thought is just to deny this MiG the shot and try to work myself into a position where I can come around on him. So I recognize that I'm low on energy up here at the apex. I put my nose down to pick up airspeed and energy so that I'll be able to maneuver with this MiG no matter what he does, and actually I'm in a very good, almost a no-lose situation right here if I play it correctly. So I can just come back up, take the A-9 shot, and no matter what, if that one had missed, I'm still in a very good position to pick up another shot on that MiG, and that's a mistake on the MiG's part, getting in close with an A-10 and getting slow with an A-10 so that I have the option of doing all these different things when it comes to managing my energy level, and I would have had just no lack of shot opportunities right there because the MiGs just simply turned back into me and then turned away at a relatively low speed. Now, the MiG is still here in TACVIEW, but he's smoking. He's a non-player as far as I'm concerned, and he was definitely dead, and he does go away momentarily. This other MiG who had taken some shots earlier, let me see what he did. He took an R-40T shot, IR guided missile, which is deceived by flare, and then turns and engages some A-10s out here over our target area. So I know that there is still a MiG out there somewhere, and at this point I believe I'm calling AWACS, asking for a new picture, and I believe the radio call that I got was picture clear. It would have been about this time. Plus, I have F-15s, another forward flight coming down in here to make a fighter sweep, just sort of a sweep to close out the mission from the F-15 point of view. So at that point, I see no reason not to come back around and to start to take out some more targets. So I do come down. My thought here was to just practice some employment techniques for CBU 105s. So I just sort of come in at a moderate altitude below actually the fusing limits of the CBU. I identify a target, and this time it was a T-72, and I was very, very careful also to make sure that, especially with the CBU, that it was not in close proximity to the JTAC. So yeah, there was no reason for me not to line up and make this delivery. So that's a CBU 105 against that tank. It dispenses, and it does take out the tank. However, I'm back into the same old situation where I have no more F-15s. It's just two MiG-25s with nothing between me and them. So I pick up, actually I think on these missile launches, that's when I picked up on the RWR contacts for MiG-25s. I turn back out of the area. I take some radar guided missile shots, which I think two or whoever, three or four, whoever this one is, was out of chaff at this point and flare at this point and was unable to avoid either of those missiles. So then I just sort of sacrificed my wingmen to the MiG-25, and it was just sort of a speed bump situation. And by this time, luckily, the MiG-25 was out of radar-guided missiles. I think I would have been in a very, very bad situation if he had started to take a couple of shots. Now, in real time, I called out missile launches right here. What I was seeing was the afterburner kicking on and off from the MiG. So that created smoke, which I interpreted as a missile launch. That's why I dropped chaff right there. And then as I come around, I saw the afterburner kick in. I thought that was another plume off of a missile launch. And it's another situation where I could have actually taken a head-on A-9 shot. I'm kind of glad that I didn't. In retrospect, it's not a very good angle for a A-9 shot with this high closure rate. Plus, you're not looking at the hottest portion of the aircraft. So it's basically the same thing that I did last time. Just try to keep myself from presenting a head-on aspect from the MiG's point of view. And luckily, the MiG makes a mistake here. Instead of turning left back into me to deny me the shot and to extend and climb and pick up energy, he turns to the right in the same direction that I was turning. So I'm able to close the circle on him, and luckily this was just at the very, very edge of the A-9's range, I'm sure. Luckily get off a long-range A-9 shot and take out that last MiG. I think I would have still been okay because I think that MiG was out of missiles in either case. So that's the mission. All in all, I think I've been very, very lucky. I say this pretty much every mission that I survive. I was lucky in some aspect to survive it. I think that's especially the case here. I was, however, very, very happy with my situational awareness throughout this entire mission. I always knew when I was in trouble and was able to do something about it. So that mainly came down to really listening out to those AWACS calls and really, really paying attention and not getting fixated on the ground targets, watching the RWR, listening to the AWACS calls, and just putting the picture together in my head and just sort of having it there in the background as I'm focusing on other aspects of the flight. And that's what always keeps me alive, is planning the mission, knowing what the expected threat is, knowing where the ground defenses are, knowing where I can pull back if I need to, and what direction to do it in, and then always in flight being conscious of where I am in relation to the threats. I mean, it's a perfect example here of how that kept me alive. And granted, it was down to a little bit of luck, but yeah, I'm as happy with this mission as any that I've ever flown when it comes to sort of making my own luck, just through planning and just through really paying attention to the situation. So folks, that's it for mission 6, and since this video is going to run a little bit short just due to the way the timing worked out on this, I'm just going to close it out with a TACVIEW replay, just running it at either 16 or 32 times speed, whatever looks like it'll work. So feel free to stick around if you want to see this entire thing just played out one more time, but in either case, I'll see you once I pick this campaign up again. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.